Hello, happy Thursday. What a weird little TikTok song. Oh, it's literally called Ticking Away. Let's change that here. I'm gonna talk over the transition to make it smoother. All right, that's quite a name. How's it going, y'all? Happy Thursday. We're here to do it. We're here to do the thing. Let's do the thing. This will be the last stream of the week. I got a little music festival I'm going to over the weekend. So no Friday or Saturday streams. I know I've missed a lot of streams lately for various reasons. Try to get back on track soon here. All right, what did we do yesterday? Yesterday we made a bunch of silly decisions about how to reference nodes through the game class. Yeah, that's fine. Second Skywalk? No, you messed up. You're first. There you go. I like how you hedged your bet and put second first. All right. So today, I think what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to make some kind of validity system, some validator system deal. You'd never be claimed first in anything. You're the first person to never claim to be first in anything. Got him. How's it going? I should have more chat commands and stuff and different stream features so people can input stuff like that, like lurks and other things. I should be better about that. There's like a big update to StreamerBot. I haven't dug into it at all. I'm interested to see all the new stuff. Make some daily dose of C#. Oh, you'll get the C#. So how do we want to do this? I think we've decided that we're not going to like block a construction that's invalid, because otherwise you'd get weird situations where someone like copies or tries to copy or cut and paste and they do it in a way that's like not technically valid, and so they lose the thing that they're trying to cut because the system prevents them from placing it. So I think instead what we're going to have is like a check before you can publish a build, like before you can say, I want to save this ship and use it. Like you could obviously save the construction while it's invalid, but before you're like, I want to publish this to be used, it can be like, you need to fix a few things. And so we're going to use a mask to display those invalid blocks, but we need to add a system. Excuse me. We need to add a system to do that check, to do that validity check. And that is going to be involved. I will say that. Thinking about where to add that. Thanks for the hydrate, Nix. How's it going? You need a coffee redeem too. Well, I always have water here. I don't always have coffee. I have neither coffee nor tea at my desk right now, which is unfortunate. I've already had my coffee today, though, so don't worry too much. I'll definitely have some tea later. All right, so when we're doing these builds and stuff, like some stuff obviously isn't allowed for other reasons, but caffeine redeem, that's a slippery slope, Nix. It's not a terrible idea, but it's a slippery slope. It would have to be something that I would then disable. I'd have to remember to disable it if I didn't have a coffee or a tea. So like people could do things where like they make their rooms, and then they could do something where they're like they try to like resize it and they accidentally make like a double thick wall or something. Well, now the system needs to tell you that this double thick wall is invalid. And I think it's going to do it with a mask. Similarly, if you place a door that's not valid, like this door isn't valid because there's a block behind it. It's actually kind of silly that it doesn't tell you that. That's an oversight on my part. Oh, here we go. So for some reason, oh, and it's because it evaluates the Y after the X. So yeah, both of these doors should be marked as invalid. They don't, which is unfortunate. But like, we want this kind of an overlay, this kind of red overlay. We want this to be a mask. So like if I try to make a 4 wide door or something that's not supported, I want an overlay over the whole block instead of what we've got now, which is just the red door. But yeah, I would also want these double thick walls to all be masked red. So we want this invalid block masking. That's what we want. We want to do that. But obviously then we need a system. The other time we'd want to mask invalid blocks is like, what if you have two totally separate block sections? Like what if you have this block over here and this block over here and they don't touch? Well, then one set of these are invalid because you can't just have a free floating block section as part of a ship, right? It would need to be connected to the rest of it. So we'll also have that sort of a validity. That's a slightly different thing when we're talking about in terms of validity. Liquid redeem. We already have hydrate. Yeah, so we want a mask. The overlay mask is not a problem. We already have a system to do the overlay part. The problem is we need a block buffer that reports on the validity of the blocks. That we need to decide how to do. Hey, Diginanigans, how's it going? I feel like I need to start making these system names longer. And start to distinguish between systems and system groups. So like the sync block buffer changes, this should be like a system group function. Where like we can do this within the system or at the end of the system group. Because right now we just run it at the end, right? Yeah. I'm running out of ways to express what I'm trying to do with 4-letter words. I need longer system names. So we need like an invalid block system. Or a block validity system. Maybe we call it something like that. Block integrity system. I don't know. I guess integrity is a different thing. That's something we'll measure from like a damage standpoint. So let's just make a system. I really need to separate the implementation of the ECS from the systems within the ECS here. I keep just throwing it all in the same place. It's not good, not good. You just need rules. So inner walls at the T or plus junction is allowed still. Yeah. No, yeah. We need a well-defined set of rules, like the auto-tiler rules. We just need a system that goes through and handles all of that. So we're going to call this like block validity system, I guess. Validation, I don't know. Block validation system. What are some synonyms for validation? You're tired of shenanigans? I feel that. Proof is the wrong word. Compliance. Yeah, we'll call it a validation. Tile synergy. I like that. I like that, Skywalk. Let's not go down that road. I feel like that road is going to lead to like weird synergies, like or block effects where we're going to be like, okay, this block is next to this block, so it gets like a 20% boost to this. That would be interesting to do from like a different system standpoints, where like maybe a system can draw more power if it's got like multiple conduit blocks next to it or something like that, or leading to it, or there's obviously interesting stuff we do there. You can see I've liked to maintain a purely 4-letter word system naming convention. We're beyond that now. We're gonna call this block validation system. It could be part of like a construct system, but I don't want to call it that. Well, you could have a ship made of platinum and one in stainless steel. Your platinum shield should resist more. Yeah. No, hull type stuff. We'll see. There should be some interesting stuff there. I think we'll have a lot of interesting stuff that you don't see in like FTL, because we have this kind of voxelized block structure. I think you'll see interesting things where you'll see like doors absorbing damage and like walls like collapsing, like vacuums being like created, and I think there'll be some interesting stuff. There's going to be a lot of systems that are doing a lot of volumetric checking of things. That is going to be expensive. That is going to be annoying. That is going to need to be threaded. Right now, the system that we have that really struggles with that is the flood fill system. We need to think about ways to get around that stuff. I need to study more things like jump flood. So this is a public sealed class. All of our systems have a ready function and a run function. Still resisting the urge to just drop everything I'm doing and do Ludum Dare tomorrow. I'm being strong, though. Watch it be, like, the best theme that they've had. I actually really liked last Ludum Dare's theme, Depths. The one that we just totally whiffed on. And failed to finish. I say we because I would like to diffuse the blame for it Like it wasn't entirely my fault. Preview blocks, settled blocks. We're gonna have a buffer. We're gonna have an invalid blocks buffer. The only real question is, do we make the validity just a flag on the buffer or on the block, just a flag on the block, or is this something that we store elsewhere? I think it's something we store elsewhere because an invalid block can't be published. So I don't think there's any reason to take up precious block flag space with an invalid flag, because an invalid block can't be published. Now, there is a question. What if, like, a block gets destroyed and so another block becomes invalid because of that? Like, a block gets separated from the ship, or like a door becomes blocked or something like that. That's very different than saying a block is invalid from the construction, during construction. So I think we don't want to use it for that. Hey, Love Lane, how's it going? Nix. Targeted level inspection evaluation system, aka tile. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty funny. How's it going, Love Lane? Happy Thursday. We're building out a system that's going to validate the blocks that we're constructing, that they're okay, and if they aren't, we're going to overlay something to show that they are not. All right, so we got this. What we do need to say is we need to say invalid blocks equals game.world.create entity. And then so if we're not going to have it be a flag, here's the thing. If it's not a flag, then can it just be a buffer of, like, coordinates? Is there any reason it needs to be anything else? I don't think so. So in that case, we need to make a new component buffer. We can just call it a coordinate buffer. You call it a coordinate buffer v3. Or 3D. I don't want to use 3D because when we say block buffer 3D, what we mean is that the buffer is organized three-dimensionally. Like it has length, width, and height or whatever. Like it has XYZ indexing. So the data is laid out in 3D. We're not going to do that here because that would be incredibly wasteful. Instead, we just want to record the vectors, the coordinates of the invalid blocks. So I think that's easiest to just do. I think I will call it like coordinate buffer v3, sort of something like that. Because then we could have a coordinate buffer v2 or v4. I like never remember how this stuff is organized. Room buffer. Structure it like that. Public read only record struct. This is an iBuffer component. And it's an iBuffer component for... Should I say v3i? Probably. Vector 3i. Whoa, how do you not know what a vector 3i is? Oh, because you're not using di.vector. Using di.vi. Let's add the required missing members. Oh, we don't need the length because the length is part of the primary constructor, integer length. This is not going to be like this. It's going to be component flag. It's going to be component dot flags. This is going to be called chord buffer v3i. So we need to add that to our list of flags that we support. I am going to go ahead and reorganize this. I actually don't know how I want to reorganize this flag list. I could just do it in the order that I add them. I kind of want them to be like... And I like having entity ID first. But after that, it's kind of just totally arbitrary. And honestly, 90% of these are buffers. Which is not great. In fact, I could probably get away from doing that somehow. Like, do we care? Like, do we want to store entities that have certain buffers together in the archetype, or do we not care? I guess this is the right way to do it, because some of these buffers actually have component data on them. Or some of the component... I know it's so... I can't even keep it straight when I'm talking about this. There's a buffer, and then there's a buffer component, which I often call a component buffer. God, so stupid. It's a component that's associated with the entity that includes the information about the buffer. There. Got it out in one, finally. We'll just put it down here for now. Oh, the block buffer doesn't specify that it's 3D. Should I do that here? Or can I not? I guess that's fine for the block buffer, because the block buffer is only ever going to be stored, he says famously, confidently, and absolutely, that it's only going to be stored in 3D. Tile integrity, legitimacy evaluation. Tile, that's so great. Followed by the Jeremiah Johnson emote. Rip. Rip RR. You know? RRR. Rip Robert Redford. Lovelane, you're like the Vogons from Hitchhiker's Guide. Your plant be called Vogsphere. That's as creative as you'll find. Yeah. All right, this is fine. I kind of don't want to include the v3i here, but I'm going to. Is there a reason not to do this way? Probably not. I'm going to reorganize that someday. I'm not going to do that on stream because that's boring. One other thing I need to do is specify the component types. Add that to the list of component types. Whoa. My whole component system makes me think I should really be using like source gen for a lot of this, but I don't because I don't understand it very well. You know, I should watch Jeremiah Johnson in honor of Robert Redford. Your emote, your not emote makes me think of that. Dude was one of the goats. All right, what are we doing? I remember. So we made our new buffer component. It's just a buffer of vector 3i's. It's going to get resized a lot. That's fine. This is an edit time only consideration. That's why I really want system groups, because right now I have an edit system that kind of owns and controls all of its subsystems. And I want to be able to do stuff where I'm like, okay, we're not in edit mode anymore. The edit system wraps everything up, suspends its operation, and does a bunch of... Right now, that's like not happening. It's kind of just running all the time, but that's because we're only ever in edit mode. But I'm thinking about the state stack and how we're going to be managing going between these different modes. Or at least I'm trying to. Okay, so we make our invalid blocks entity. Our invalid blocks entity is going to possess a buffer. Can I get rid of these room buffers? Do I use them for anything? Room buffer. Who uses this? Does the fill system actually use these? And I know the fill system, like, has some functions for this. Is it actually doing anything? Set room bounds. Do I actually use this for anything? Should the edit system own the invalid blocks? No. The validation system should own that. Or maybe if there's a construction system, maybe. I don't know. All right, whatever. I'm not going to worry about these room buffers. Maximum warp, no jewel. How's it going? Diginanigans, you don't know why you've never been why you've just never been a fan of meta code or source generators. You'd prefer to have process other resources if needed and output whatever you need as something separate, rather than your code generating more code that is then used by the rest of the system. You find it can get unwieldy quickly. Yeah, I think it's very true. I think you'll see lots of people doing very cool things. Thank you for the stretch, no Joel. I think you'll see lots of really cool stuff happening with like metaprogramming. Like, I know Jai, which is Jonathan Blow's programming language. Jai has a lot of really interesting metaprogramming stuff that it does that's pretty unique for, you know, game programming. The thing for me is I have yet to see an ECS written in C#. Ones I've either looked at GitHub or, you know, Unity's ECS. Not Unity's game object ECS, but they're like dots ECS. I have yet to see someone solve the ECS problem in C# without the use of source generators, except yours truly. But I would argue I haven't solved ECS. My ECS is really dumb and very poorly made.
Your logic was impeccable, Captain.
Yeah. Thank you. So I don't know. I don't have a solution for how to do this elegantly or cleanly that doesn't involve source generation, but I haven't done it myself. Someday we'll circle back on that to use the corpo speak. Someday we'll circle back on that when we care. So what am I doing? I'm adding the buffer that we are going to need. So we're saying game.world.add buffer component coordinate buffer v3i vector 3i I thought I wrote this using di.vi. Oh no, it was the other. It was in the buffer. I added that. ECS, eccentric coding system. Yeah, pretty much, Nix. Entity component system. You're correct, no Joel. Eccentric coding system is right, Nix. That's how it feels. If someone's first response after saying I wrote an ECS, the first thing someone should say after I wrote an ECS is, I didn't need to. Turns out I didn't need to. That's generally how it works. But yeah, diginanigans, I don't know. I also am uncomfortable using systems that generate stuff that I don't understand. Which is, you know, part of why I'm very skeptical of AI coding and stuff. But from a practical consideration, at least as far as the source generation for C# is concerned, I feel like we're going to get there. But I need to understand it better. It's not something I've used much. If anyone hasn't seen part 2 of the tower, Primogen's like week-long game jam to make their tower defense game with Cursor. I'm not saying Cursor is good, but that is some damn good content. They got Adam C. Eunice and a bunch of other people that I'm only tangentially aware of. So good. On YouTube, go watch the Tower Part 2 on Primogen's channel. It's so funny. Love that stuff. They filmed it like a reality show. It's so good. At least they filmed Part 2. Part 1 felt more like a game jam. Part 2 is pretty crazy by comparison. Invalid blocks. What am I doing here? I need the length. Can I? So what I would like to do is I would like to make it possible to add a buffer component of length 0. Is that like a thing that I can do? Add buffer equals get enough for buffer memory map dot add. What happens when you try to allocate something with 0 length? Oh, I could just say empty. Maybe we have an overload that doesn't take a length. And that version just uses memory owner empty. Instead of memory owner allocate. I can't see, obviously, what happens here. But that's maybe the correct thing. Yeah, because I don't think 0 is going to be a valid size for allocate. You know what I mean? But yeah, let's do that. So let's make an overload of this that doesn't have a, that's parameterless. Private buffer ID, add buffer T, where T. Wait, so how do we know? Oh, no, we're just adding a buffer and getting it back. Right. Skywalk, you've used Claude Code a lot. It's great at certain things, horrible at others. You can only review it as a non-programmer since you do not use it as you should use Claude Code yet, and you don't build complex things with it, but singleton systems. Yeah, I don't know. I don't use it. I have a friend who's been trying to use it to make a really complex procedural generation system, and that seems like a tough use case because it's already hard enough to understand the output of a procedural generation system, and it's a lot harder to understand it when you don't understand the implementation. So I don't know. I'm skeptical. I'm deeply skeptical. But that's not what we're really about here. Love Lane. You're doing Jax. Oh, you're doing Jamsepticeye? You learned you're not an artist, even with a pre-made tile set. You need an auto tiler that like comes up with ideas with your existing tile set. Oh, yeah. You can get that with terrains. I mean, you have to tell it the parameters. Are you using Godot? So instead of, so we're going to say memory owner. Byte. Dot empty. Dot empty. We don't even care about the T, huh? We can just say add buffer. It like literally doesn't matter. Interesting. All right, so then the what called this? Called it from here, add buffer component. So we can have a version of this. Public T1. Do we need to know T2 for any other reason? Kind of. We might not actually need to specify that. I don't know why I wrote this above. It makes it like really hard to see. Yep. You've been only using Godot for the last year now. You really like it. Yeah, I do too. I love it. I adore Godot. I've used it for, I guess, 2 years now. After a long time of using Unity. I love it. I would never go back. But yeah, so you need like the Godot terrain system, right? To help you with that part. Where does terrains go? Is that under tile sets? I think it is. So like you can build a terrains. I don't do this. I opted to build my own auto tiler. But obviously that's not a solution during a game jam. Where are the terrains? Creating terrain sets. Yeah, terrain set seems like the thing you want because that would let the auto tiler build its own stuff. I mean, it's not going to be fun. Actually, I think what you want is patterns, right? Because you want something more complex than just here's the legit rules. I think you actually want patterns. I think patterns is something different. I think you're able to specify like higher level stuff. Here's me giving advice about something I haven't used. Where's patterns? It's the first project you used the tile layer since they deprecated the tile map. Oh yeah, tile map layer is great. My game would not be able to exist without tile map layer. That was the To me, that was the feature of Godot 4.3. I thought there was this thing called patterns. Oh, so that's a pre-made tile placement. Never mind. That's not for the auto tiler. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you get it to like handling tile connections on. I don't totally understand the intersection of platform or of patterns and terrain. But yeah, that's definitely a good approach. Sorry, not as helpful as I was hoping I would be. Do I need the T1 component for anything? What do we use it for? Oh, we need to return the component, right? T1 comp with buffer ID, comp with buffer ID equals blank. Actually, if we're doing this version of it, I don't think I need to pass in the component, huh? Because we're not telling it the size. Oops. So can I just not do that? Do I actually care? Oh yeah, I need to know about T1. Where T1 is an unmanaged iBuffer component. Okay, we can just do this. Here we can actually just say new T1 0. Is there a parameterless iBuffer component constructor? There probably isn't. That's not a good example. None of these are good examples. It's kind of smart. It will put the right terrain in, but you still need to know what you want the level to look like. Yeah. It's not making the artistic choices for you. Did Godot creator create a game with Godot yet? Like Unreal create big demo video gameplay when they release new engine, but you feel you've never seen anything made with new Godot features, or you're not looking correctly. Blender did. They did a partnership with Blender for 4.5, I think. Blender Godot game 4.5. Some of the Blender team did. I'm not 100% sure where that is. Oh, here it is. It's from the dev snapshot. Super cute. I think part of the reason you'll see that less than with like Unreal is the Godot Foundation is pretty tight with its money. I don't think Dog Walk. So this is a game that Blender made to showcase Godot. But this is the kind of stuff you'll see. It's partnerships, because like the Godot Foundation is going to do as little as necessary by themselves, right? They don't have the money to like fund it. Unity barely has money to make demo games, right? Yeah, but this looks cool. I guess it's out. Short, free, open source project brought to you by Blender Studio. Very cute. Dog Walk. Overwhelmingly positive. That's fun. And it's free. I love that. Oh, but you can get a pay for supporter pack. I love that too. Super cute. Yeah, the graphics are cool. I love the low frame rate of the animation. It gives it an almost stop motion feel. It's really nice. I love the really low frame rate. Very cool. All right, so there isn't a parameterless constructor. I feel like maybe there should be. I don't need to have that now, but I could. Okay, everything is upset. I'm in the middle of writing something here, I guess. I'm gonna call this buffer component. Be a new T1 of 0 with buffer ID equals add buffer. Cannot provide arguments when creating an instance of a type. Okay, yeah, that's good. That's what we want, actually. Okay, so if we are adding it by its generic type, we actually can't pass. Although, why doesn't the with work then? Oh, because I don't need to... I'm not... Right. I don't need the with. It's an object initializer. Buffer component. Okay, cool. So we can add a buffer component that's going to be initialized to 0 length. I think that should be fine. I don't totally understand why I pass in a component here. It looks like I could theoretically just pass in a length. I guess it's just nice to pass in the component and get it back. Shenanigans. You use Tray for your day job. You don't really use any AI stuff for your personal dev work. Works really well for common patterns, but struggles when you do anything that is out of the norm. Full agentic stuff doesn't work well for the type of work that you do, but works well to scaffold stuff, help debug, or toss ideas. Yeah, I think it's good when you actually don't care very much about the quality of the work. When it's something that you just need, like when it's providing a starting point, I think it's okay. I can't use it at all for what I do, because what I do is like compliance based. And so something that's not 100% accurate is basically 0% useful to me. And like the results of like AI processes are like fundamentally unknowable. Like you always have to check and verify that what you get back is correct. And it's like, if I'm gonna put that much effort into verification, I would rather just build procedures that achieve a similar goal deterministically that I can then audit and say, yes, this is what I got out of this process. So for me, I don't use it at all. I've found no utility in any of this stuff, but that's just me. I think when I might be tempted to use it if I made a game that needed a lot of compatibility testing between a lot of different items or skills or balance stuff. Like if I needed something to play a game like thousands of times over a few minutes and then tell me like, here are the patterns, here's like what typically happens, like stuff like that. I think for testing, I think that would be a really interesting application. But yeah, for development, I've found literally no use to it. MB post today wasn't ray tracing, it was real displacement. What, in Godot? Did Godot make an announcement today? I haven't seen anything. They've announced that they're going to do GodotCon Boston next year, which is great. I'm gonna spend all the money I'm not gonna spend on GDC next year. I'm going to spend that money instead on Boston, Godot Boston. That'll be fun. It's nice to make change logs and commit messages, you think? Yeah, I think that's fine. I think for all that secondary stuff where you really don't care about the accuracy of it, yeah, like if you want to generate patch notes or commit messages or change logs, sure. Obviously being clarity in that space is good, but also like doesn't matter that much. I don't know. All right, so what are we doing? So we've got our thing. We've got our empty buffer. This is a song I don't like. I'm gonna need to. Someone's about to start talking. I'm pretty sure. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm thinking of a different song. I don't love this lo-fi trend where you just have like Alan Watts talking in the background of your song for some reason. Okay, you can barely hear it here. I guess that's okay. All right, so we've got a validation system up. We've got a invalid blocks entity. That invalid blocks entity is being initialized with an empty buffer, importantly. There's actually a couple other places where I would like to initialize with an empty buffer. I don't quite remember where all those places are, but I'll go back and update those as I need to. I think it's some of these maybe, like the packed tile map data buffer. This should be, yeah, this should be parameterless. Because that's going to be, this is going to be resized every single time we use it. Maybe it should be called add empty buffer component. I could say empty. Maybe we call it something different so we don't accidentally use it. So we don't actually use the... Why does it say this? Make return type void. That's interesting. But we return the T1. Why do you think I don't need this? We make a buffer component and we return it, and yet it's like, you could make this a void. I don't think that's true. Oh wait, we do get the component back, but we don't actually use it for anything. Oh, maybe we don't actually need it this way. Can I say that then? Is there anyone that actually immediately uses the component? Well, I guess for this one we do. But if it's empty, we don't need to use it. So that's a good point. Maybe that can be a void. And then we don't actually need to do that. And then in fact, what we could do is we could actually move this down here. Like that. No, Jewel, you find it sometimes helps track down bugs, not always, but the times it does, saves you a lot of time, you think? Love Lane, you used to ask AI easy questions just because it's faster. You're wary now. You used Claude Code in the browser before, and you asked, how could your state machine be improved for ideas? And it gave you code that was on your second monitor. Now you can improve it. You never gave it that code. So the website can see the screen. That's a little weird. Yeah, I could never get over the ickiness of it. This is not supposed to be, you know, a big anti-AI rant, but these tools are like, when you look at the ecological, moral, and sociological, or ecological, ethical, and sociological, like, implications of the technology, and not even just implications, but like the actual, you know, reality of using this stuff and having this stuff exist is so bad that for what little utility that I think a person could find from it, I personally, this is personal, I would never be able to get past that icky feeling. But I try to be very purposeful about stuff. Like, I'm lucky, I live in a big city, I don't need to have a car. I don't have to worry about the ecological impacts of a car. In the same way, I don't need to use AI, so I don't want to have to think about the impacts of using AI, so I don't. It's a very personal choice, I think, for each person to decide, you know, where they draw the line in terms of their responsibility to people and the planet and the future. It's tough. It's tough because I understand the pressure. All right, I think we did this. I think I'll also call this add empty buffer. I know I could just do this with just function, like overloading, but I want to be clear about what we're attempting to do here. I don't want to accidentally invoke this in a way that doesn't make sense. So let's go down here. Let's change that to add empty buffer. Love Lane, you agree 100%. You think there's a lot of data that the centers are literally burning water? Yeah, no, it's crazy. Yeah, the amount of resources that are involved. Just so, like, the amount of damage that's being done to the environment just so you can ask a question and get the wrong answer is insane. And the proponents of this kind of tech always have the same answer. It's that this is inevitable. It's an arms race. It's like the damage of not pursuing the technology is greater than the damage of pursuing the technology. And it's like, that is such a insane worldview. I mean, it's the same kind of worldview that led to the proliferation of nuclear weapons, which I think history in general has decided that that was a bad idea now. Like, I don't think history is going to look back kindly on the AI tech bro transformation of all these industries. If anyone's around, you know, to write history about it, which is not a, you know, a guarantee. What were we doing? Writing a block validation system? Refactoring things? This is always what happens to me. I'm like, oh, I could refactor the system to like make this a little easier and more intuitive to use this way. And then I am totally distracted. Is there anyone else that's unnecessarily... There probably are. I'm not going to think about it though, but there probably are people who are adding buffers that don't have, yeah, like this new room buffer 1 thing. I'm not even convinced these room buffers are being used, so I'm not going to touch them, but... Nix, you personally feel You personally, if you feel like you have to use AI, you try to use a local host solution. That way you don't feel bad about it. Skywalk, but using local things legitimate the tons of resources used to create the model. Yeah, I don't know about the cost of I assume the creating the model is a higher cost than using the model. Makes sense. Yeah, I think it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situations. Like, obviously a local model would be pretty cool to use, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough about the details to get into the like how much it costs to like train these models. I know it's a lot. And we shouldn't be draining lakes to like, you know, teach Grok how to like generate hate speech. That's probably not the best use of like our freshwater resources, right? I've heard that even just the environmental impacts of like individual data centers are outrageous, and how they're impacting their local communities ecologically. All right, I swear we're gonna do the thing that we said we were gonna do today. So we've got our buffer, we've got our blocks. What do we need to do to actually do this? We need to get. What are we going to evaluate? Are we going to evaluate the preview blocks or the settled blocks? Probably only the settled blocks. In the same way that flood fill system only flood fills the settled blocks, not the preview blocks. I think we should do the same thing. Wait, what is this? Oh, no way. Am I actually doing this with the preview blocks? That's not right. Hold on. I actually have to reevaluate everything that's going on here in this system. Why are we using the preview blocks when we're doing flood fill? That's got to be like crazy expensive. Or it's not stable, if anything. No, Joel. Using Olama and VS Code, it's pretty doable having a local agentic setup, and you can choose more ethical models to run. Okay, that sounds good. Skywalk. It's the same debate from, oh, I use an EV, I'm virtuous, responsible person versus gas guzzling truck. Sure, but you polluted XYZ from extracting everything you needed to build the EV, and you need to replace the batteries every X years, blah, blah, blah. I think it's more nuanced than that. I understand what Skywalk is saying, because it is true. It is like your EV, the lithium mines used to, you know, get the materials for your EV battery might have, you know, destroyed an entire habitat. So it's like, it's more than I agree that there are more dimensions than just, you know, the tip of the iceberg as far as what we're dealing with, the way we interact with the system. But obviously that's the only part of it we can control. And like I said earlier, it's a personal choice, I think. You know? Because all you can really do is decide whether you are going to engage with it. And then if you decide to engage with it, you can decide, you know, how you're going to engage with it. And if you can find a workflow that feels, you know. At the end of the day, it's whatever lets you sleep at night, right? Because the person that's going to have to live with your choices is you. Well, other people have to live with your choices too, but... All right, so we got the preview blocks, we got our settled blocks. So the preview blocks are the blocks that are in flux. They're the blocks that are changing because you're actively like editing and moving, and it's the stuff that's happening in the moment. The settle blocks is like, okay, we've committed to change, like we've committed to a placement, like we're done resizing or moving, and we've either hit like paste or we've lifted off the mouse, and now the change has been recognized and is reflected more broadly. So the settle blocks is the only buffer that we should be using for this kind of stuff, but for some reason we're using the other one. And I'm sure I had a good reason for that, but now I'm concerned. So we're going to probably slot this block validation system kind of around the fill system, because it should run whenever there's been a buffer change, like a definite buffer change. And that way you're not being judged every time you're like, every frame that you're in the middle of a change that might be invalid. So it needs to be in the fill system, which isn't great because it's going to be one more thing that just hangs up everything whenever there's a buffer change. But that's my fault for having the flood fill system be so unoptimized. And honestly, the flood fill system and the block validation system, ideally what I do is I get those to be running in parallel tasks. The problem is we'd have to essentially block anytime if we're in the middle of this sync buffer process, we can't do it again. And so I need to set it up in such a way that's safe, where we're not losing things because we're like unable to sync, because we're waiting for so long on these processes that are dependent on the sync. What's crazy though is, why does the fill system run before the sync? That's why we're operating on the preview blocks, because we're actually running the flood fill system before the sync. Why are we doing that? The situation would not be improved with code comments. Just want to head that off at the pass. Love Lane, you're talking about the necessity for regulation. Well, I agree with you. The only thing I'm going to say about that is, I don't know if you're going to see that in the current administrative environment, unless California specifically like goes ham. Which actually, California has revealed some AI regulations that they're putting out that are pretty huge. I haven't read too much into it, but it's definitely going after like Meta, OpenAI, California companies that can't ignore state regulations. So that'll be interesting to see. Skywalk, for you, a Canadian who lives in snow 60% of the year, using an EV with reduced blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you're just talking about your personal... the difficulty of getting EVs to work for rural Canada. Yeah, that goes back to the, like, everyone has a personal responsibility to evaluate how these technologies work for them in, you know, what their responsibility is to the environment. It really is a personal choice. And yeah, government regulation needs to come in, because corporations are not motivated to make these choices correctly, you know? The incentives for a corporation to make responsible choices is usually pretty warped or non-existent. But, you know, the same problem exists at the government level. It's horrible. Love Lane, you're jelly. You live in New York City and you feel like the car is 100% necessary. You only know a few people who don't. You live in New York City and you feel like a car is 100% necessary? That's crazy. I mean, that just shows how, like, broken our public transportation system is. But yeah, I live in San Francisco and I have never had a car here in this city, and I have never needed one. It's tough. Yeah, that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, we could argue about whether an EV or a gas car is better, but obviously the best choice is to just not have a car. And in the same way, we could talk about, you know, where you got your model from, and, you know, what resources you're using to generate or train or you know, create the responses. But it's like, yeah, the most ecologically pure choice is to just not use any of it. But I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. We're not trying to, like, judge people too harshly here. Or we're trying to respect people's individual judgment on understanding their situation and using the stuff in a way that they feel okay about. That's all we can really do. So I still don't totally fully understand why we're running this on the preview blocks before we sync everything. I actually think I would want to do the opposite. I think I would want to sync everything and then run all of these systems, because that way the systems could run in parallel on this. It's essentially the preview blocks and the settle blocks is like a double buffer. And that would give us some protection when we're doing task parallelization. Still needs work. Thank you for the subscription. Subscribe for 18 months. Currently on an 18-month streak. That's amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a minute. How have you been? If you're just lurking, don't worry about it. I really appreciate you stopping by and supporting the stream as much as you do. What a legend. Love Lane, you barely know people who are actually able to work within the city. Most drive to New Jersey. Yeah, I'm sure it's one of the two. It's either you like live outside of the city and you have to drive into it, or you live inside the city and you have to drive out of it. Yeah, no, I get that. That makes sense. It's tough. You're really lucky that you live in a cheaper city here in Germany, Nix. But you work in a much more expensive city. Taking the train only takes 15 to 20 minutes. It's amazing. But yeah, the German trains are pretty famous. That's pretty cool. No, it's crazy. When people come out here, like my partner knows a lot of international designers that come here to study and work, and they all look at our public transportation infrastructure and they're like, this is like worse than like rural train and bus systems. Like, and they're talking about like Caltrain and BART. Like they're talking about like our core metropolitan like transit systems as being worse than like the international standard is for like rural transport. It's crazy. It's very true. And it's because America is kind of broken in terms of having made the choice to be a car-centric country and now being essentially stuck in that forever. Nobody puts money into public services and infrastructure because they'd rather just solve the problem themselves privately, because that's what we've grown up to expect to do. Is you don't worry about public infrastructure. You just try to get enough personal wealth that you can opt out of needing the public infrastructure. And you can kind of see that in literally everything that we do. You can see how that impacts the health system, the transport system, everything. Our American individualism has caused a pretty horrible runaway effect on our public infrastructure, from education to transport to pretty much to healthcare to pretty much everything. It's horribly broken. I don't know why I have this much energy to talk about this. I've been really tired. But this has been a nice discussion, and we've kept it friendly, which I appreciate. We've kept it friendly and non-ideological. And that's important. If that stops, we shut this kind of stuff down. We got them going. Yeah, you got me going. German trains are sadly infamous for being late most often than not. Oh, that's funny. They're famous for being quite good trains. I don't know about the operational details of running the trains, but when someone buys trains, when another nation buys a train, I think there are two choices. You either buy a German train or you buy a Japanese train. That's all I've ever seen in the train world. I'm not a huge train guy. I'd have to ask a friend of mine who is a huge train guy, but from my personal experience, there's really only two players in the game for engineering trains, and it's Germany and Japan. Skywalk, you're biased. You big old truck. No, I understand. I understand if you're in a rural environment. If you're not hooked up to infrastructure, you really can't. You have to choose. You have to do things to like live. You know, you have to be resilient. You need robust systems. So like you need generators. You need things that aren't gonna break down if you don't have access to the grid. You know. No, I get that. I'll probably get there someday because I really want to move someday to somewhere where it rains and there's forests and rivers. I would like to move up into the Pacific Northwest someday, and I know when I do that, I will be in this world that I can ignore. Because I live in San Francisco, and our infrastructure is incredible. Well, it's the transportation is still shit, but I don't have to worry about things like energy availability. But I know I would if I moved outside of, if I moved on to an island outside, like off like Seattle or something. I know I'd have all these concerns. All right, we're talking about trains. I'm trying to remember what I'm doing. I'm deciding if I want to change the way the flood fill system works so that we reverse the order of the sink. Because right now we basically do all of the stuff we're doing on the preview layer in the preview blocks buffer, which is like, we're placing blocks, erasing blocks, moving stuff around, copy pasting. We're doing all of this stuff. And we're doing that in the preview buffer, which is called that because that's what we render, so that you can see things that are going to be committed before they're committed, so that you can actively in real time see what's happening. And then the thing is, when we're committing a change, when we are like, okay, we're gonna place a block, we're gonna erase a block, we're gonna do this thing, we're gonna commit this change, then we run a sync, and we sync everything from the preview buffer to the settled buffer, because everything's getting settled, right, from its preview state. You see? The thing is, though, we're running the follow-up system, which is the flood fill system, before we're doing that sync, and I don't understand why. We're also doing this room compartmentalization stuff. Oh, we are using this. We are using the room system. I think the cutaway system uses the room buffer. Let me see if that's true. Maybe that's why. If there's a reason, I could see that being the reason. But we could also just... I'm actually not 100% sure how I would want to handle that if that's the case. So let's verify that that's the case first. So when we do the cutaway, room bounds, buffer read only... Oh, no, we're getting the rooms from the settled blocks. This might just have been an oversight. In which case, I don't even want to have this buffer on the preview blocks. Because we don't need it. The room buffer is like a thing that has a list of the compartments. I probably should name it something like that, but I like blocked out rooms. I like short variable names, which I shorten things and shorten things and shorten things until they don't mean anything anymore, and then I go the other way and I just make really long names, and then I just start shortening them again. That's the vicious cycle I live in. I don't even know what's happening. Okay. I had to check the clock. I was like, how long have we been running? I've kind of just been on a tear. Not a productivity tear. I've gotten literally nothing done today. We've been on like a verbal tear. I've just been motor mouthing. Just yapping, as they say, as the kids say. I've just been yapping. Yap, yap, yap. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me while I yap. I guess I'm trying to get stuff done today because, like I said, we're not going to be streaming this weekend. Because I'm going to be at a little bluegrass festival in the park. I say little bluegrass festival, like tens of thousands of people come to this event, and it's a big park, but it's also free, so it's just this low key. It's so enjoyable because there's no sunk cost. You can bring your own like food and beverage. They've been cracking down on that a little more, I think, but I think it's still true that you can bring your own food and beverage. Very, very sweet thing when you look at the world of, you know, Coachellas and stuff. It's really cool to have a free music festival in the city. Have the AI handle the variable names? Yeah, exactly. All right. So I think the first thing we're gonna try to do is we're gonna try to change this ordering of the edit system. We're going to attempt to, when we do a sync, we're going to attempt to do the sync first. Then we are going to run all the systems that depend on the sync after. We're going to see if we can do that and not break everything. And if that's true, for one thing, that makes parallelizing the tasks like the flood fill system a lot easier because they can work on their own data. They can work on their own data, and we can continue fiddling with, like if the player submits a change and then immediately starts fiddling again, we can still provide them feedback in real time about what they're doing, and then just wait to sync again until after the last sync is done. And we can define that as being, you know, all the systems that depend. Because that was a problem I was having before, which is obvious. It's a problem anyone's ever run into who does any amount of parallel processing, is if the data changes while you're in the middle of the process, that can be rough. But it's pretty easy to just manage that with double buffering. And eventually what we want to do is we want to have like barriers. I haven't introduced the concept of a barrier yet. Probably will before too long. I haven't had to worry too much about managing the systems because we aren't doing very much right now, but that will obviously change. Skywalk, you started the day with 69 tickets. Nice. You ended the day with 86. Oh my god. That's horrible. So why does the room buffer get started with size 1? And do we always resize it whenever we run it? I guess that would be my other question. Because if we always resize it every time, room buffer comp, game.world to get comp. So we get the buffer comp. If room buffer comp length is not equal to count, then we set it, then we get it. Set buffer component. Could we just get the component back? I don't know why I have this thing where we set the component and then have to get it. I feel like we should just return the component. T1, set buffer component. Oh, we don't pass the component is the thing. Oh no, but we got it right here. We got your component right here. Here we can just say component equals component with length equals length. Then we can set it, and then we can return it. And then we don't need to do this two-step of setting the buffer component. If we're going to set it, we might as well get it back, because 90% of the time, the thing we do after setting it is we need to use it. So we might as well make that one step. And now there's going to be all sorts of places where I could actually implement that I don't, but I'm not going to worry about that right now. I might worry about it a little. So like here, we have game.world that's set buffer component. And then we have get component. And so what we can just do instead is we can say room buffer component equals this and get rid of that. That way we're only getting it once. We don't have to get it once, then resize it, and then get it again. And in fact, we don't actually even have to do this room buffer comp.length is not equal to count thing. That actually already occurs in the set buffer component. We already do that check where we compare the lengths of things. And if we don't need to change the length, we just don't. So I can actually get rid of that too. In which case, we can just go all the way up here. Get rid of everything else. Symbol. It wants me to say what kind of component this is, which is fair. Skywalk, it's like all you did was watch Digital Iliad. I've only been streaming for an hour and a half. Room buffer. And then here we're gonna try not to use preview blocks. We're gonna try to use settle blocks. We're going to attempt to do this. I'm a little concerned about why we do it this way. I'm sure if there is a reason, it will become very apparent. All right, let's go down. Are we all good here? Is that it? Are we good to test this? I think so. Do you not fit? Barely. Oh, missed one. Hey, Fox Shadow, 12-hour stream. 12-hour stream. Only during game jams, and I've actually been trying to be better about not doing that. But how's it going, Fox Shadow? Thanks for hanging out. All right, let's try it. Let's see what happens. We'll probably instantly get a crash. Because I'm sure some other system depends on a different system order. Okay, so far nothing terrible is happening yet. Whoa, here we go. Here's something. Why is it doing it this way? There's contention for resources here. Watch that it didn't update the blocks. Oh, that's why. I understand why. That's the problem. Because we sync from the settled blocks, but what we need to do... Oh, shoot. We actually have to get that information back to the preview blocks or they'll never update. Like here something weird is happening where it's like taking the data about the compartment somehow from the subtle block and bringing it back in when I mouse over. Not quite sure what's causing that, but it's definitely illustrating the problem. Okay, so how would we do that? How would we do that in a way that will work and not be crazy? So I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the fact that this data transfer is one way. That's why we write to the preview blocks from the flood fill system. We shouldn't. I would like to not. I would like to figure this out. So maybe that's part of the sync. Maybe what we do is we sync. How do we do that though? How do we guarantee that that data is valid when we want to push it back? Because it might not be anymore. All right, how are we going to do that? How are we going to manage this data synchronicity thing? You're starting a company. You're gonna make bug screens for German trains. That sounds like $1 million idea, or at least $1,000 idea. Diginanigans, you started the day with 4 tickets, accomplished 1, have a new one, so still 4 tickets. Oh no. That said, the bulk of the tickets you get are multi-week-long projects. Yeah, I feel like that's a misuse of the ticketing system. I know IT loves their tickets, but I feel like a ticket is not the appropriate venue for submitting projects. But I mean, how do you measure the work if there isn't a ticket, right? How has anyone ever gotten anything done without Jira? Right? Is the question. Is Jira not the backbone of software development? I don't think anything would get done if there weren't, if Jira wasn't there telling us what to do. I'm being a little sardonic here. More than a little, maybe. I guess I'm just feeling this is nice. I'm feeling better than I have the last couple of days as far as the streaming. I felt quote unquote out of shape. I didn't really want to do anything, but I'm feeling better. All right, so here's our problem. So we have everything in the preview buffer. Also, well, let's do this version. Let's change this to add empty buffer. What was that? Let's change this since we decided to change that anyway. We can add an empty buffer. We can also add an empty buffer here. Not convinced we need both yet. But we'll cross that. We'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Hopefully after we've gotten across it, ideally. Now, ideally, you don't burn a bridge until after you cross it. The shenanigans, yeah, you use motion, so they are technically tasks, not tickets. And it's a project management SaaS, but as far as you're concerned, it's just the thing telling you what you need to do. Yeah. Yeah, that seems like what do they call it? They call that a distinction without a difference. All right, so here's our problem. Here's our problem. Does the fill system not have a ready function? It should. It might not accomplish anything, but should have it. No, it doesn't. I kind of want to add an interface. so that I can enforce some of this stuff. But the problem is if I have a parameterized run, then the interface still wants the parameter-less version, or it won't respect it. I guess there are ways I can nest interface definitions and make that work. I haven't felt like doing that yet. All right, so here's our problem. We set all this compartment data. We want to set it after the sync. The reason we were setting it before the sync was so that that data itself gets communicated or gets passed on. If we move the flood fill to after the sync, then we need to, maybe what we do is we have like a sync back. And the sync back needs to be a little safer. Does it? Does the sync back need to be safer? Sync room buffer changes. Why do we need to do this? Why do we need to sync room buffer changes? I'm not using these in 2 places. I don't think we need to do this. Because as far as I can tell, I guess that's the thing of it. The tile system is using it. So maybe we don't need to sync. Maybe we only need to sync back. So we could sync block buffer changes, then we could sync back room buffer changes. Well, no, we need to sync back the block buffer changes too. Trying to do this in such a way where we are doing it relatively safely, in that we're not going to try to change things that no longer exist. I think that's okay with the block buffers, because the block buffers sizes don't change really very often. Actually, the block buffer sizes are going to change at some point, but maybe they don't change very often. Maybe they only change at a very well-defined point. I think we can do that. So I think what we do is we sync stuff over from the preview when we're ready to commit a change. We do the processing that we need to do on that double buffer that we sync to. If anything needs to go back, then we sync that stuff back when we're done. But we just need to do it. We just need to manage that just such a way. Well, right now we don't need to worry about it at all because this isn't parallelized. So right, I guess we actually don't need to think about this at all right now. We just need to do a sync back. We don't need to worry about safety. I don't think we sync room buffer changes though. I think the only thing we do is sync back room buffer changes. Because the room buffer is a product of the fill system, so there's nothing to sync at this phase. I guess the only question is... No, there's no question. So this, I don't think we need this. So let's write the reverse of these. So let's say sync back block buffer changes. I think the problem here, if there's a problem here with this sync, is actually what would be great is if we don't actually have to sync the blocks back and we only sync the rooms back. That would be ideal. Can we do that? What is the anatomy of a block? I don't think we can do that because I think the block itself knows about, well, it knows what rooms it's in, so that's not great. Is there a reason it knows what rooms it's in? I think we had this And I think it was clever, and I think we don't use this anymore. The problem is I can't really verify that because it's in the primary constructor. Yeah, there's really no way to scrutinize this. Who would use this if they did? It would just be the cutaway system. So we can probably just scrutinize the cutaway system, which honestly should be its own system now. We should pull the cutaway system out of the tile system. But for right now, it's fine because it's fine. Doesn't really matter right now. All right, so cutaways, block.rooms.hasAny, roombounds.length. Okay, so we set all these rooms. The block does know. Oh, because the block has a list of all the rooms it belongs to. Do we need that? Do we have to have that? Does it matter? Can we safely sync this back without worrying about anything else? I think the answer is yes. Okay, I think we can do it. I think we can safely do it. I guess we're syncing back a subset of the data, though, then, in that case. If we want to, like, only sync back the room data, but not everything else, because everything else might have changed. Maybe this is not good to have in this place, in this one place here. I'm trying to defend against, I mean, it seems unlikely to occur, but it's technically possible for someone to commit the changes and then make new changes while the old changes are being processed, which is part of the reason why we have a double buffer. But it just means if we sync stuff back, we need to be careful about how we do that, so that we don't do it in such a way where, oh, not what I wanted to do. There we go. Okay. When do we actually do this stuff? We do this here, don't we? Block. Okay, no, that stuff happens up here and compartmentalize. I think. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't actually happen here. I'll reset compartments, so we definitely do that. So I guess we can do this basic thing where we can just only change the room data. And I guess that will work fine, because if the block is otherwise changed, that might look weird sometimes, but I think it'd be mostly fine. So what we need to do then, so when is this, how is this going to happen? This is going to happen here. We're going to sync back block buffer changes, and we're going to sync back room buffer changes. What we should do is we should have, like, we should specify what systems work on which versions of these buffers, and then we should, like, disallow them from working on both. Because that would really mess things up if that happens. It does explain why we have two sets of room buffers, though, is so that we can, the tile system can read from this one while the fill system is writing to this one, and vice versa, you know, etc. for the other buffer. Let me just double check to see how the tile system interacts with that. I feel like room bounds, and room bounds.length is greater than 0. So who actually uses the room bounds? Does anyone? Does anyone actually use these? Hello? Honestly, I might want to put the block's room data on a different buffer. And at what point you're like, well, does it need to be a... It's like, do I even need a whole buffer for that? Or could I just essentially have like a list? I mean, that's part of the buffer, but do I need like a 3D buffer? This is a trade-off that I'm constantly making, which is like, do I store the data where the coordinate of the data is implicit because I store it in a 3D buffer? So the placement of the data in the buffer tells you where in space that is. It's like an implicit way to record a vector 3 coordinate, right? Or whatever vector. You could use vector 2, vector 4. You can do whatever when you store it like that. And it's like, that's a lot of extra data because that means every coordinate has a position in the buffer. So you're making these big buffers that could be mostly empty. And so you have to like kind of guess how dense you think that data structure is going to be. If you think it's going to be pretty dense, then it makes sense to do it that way. If you think it's going to be very sparse, it would probably be better to have a buffer that's like ideally, for this case, it would be like a vector 4 or something, so that it could have a 3 coordinate position, and then you could use the 4th value for like the bit field. Something like that. That might be the way to do it here. Instead of, because the problem is just keeping this information right here is having an impact on the way I want to sync this stuff. But in a certain sense, it makes sense to have this information right here. Because, yeah, like right now you can just ask the block if it's outside by just checking its rooms. I would lose that ability. We would need a different buffer for that. And that different buffer would either work a number of ways. It would either have a list. It could either have a list of everyone in a room, at which point you need to iterate the whole list every time you want to ask. Don't like that. Don't want to do that. What we could also do is have just that room buffer, which is just a list of axis-aligned bounding boxes. That's not great because that will lead to a lot of false positives. The axis-aligned bounding boxes are like a approximation of the rooms. Kind of makes you wonder why I have them at all. I think it's just for the cutaway system. All right, thoughts. My mind is a raging torrent filled with rivulets of thought, careening to a sea of possibilities. That's my Headley Lamar quote. All right, so I don't think we're going to move away from this bit field of rooms being on the block. I think that's good. I think I'm happy with that. I'm not happy that it's 64, but, you know, we can increase it when I eventually figure that out. If we need it. I feel like being able to support 64 rooms is reasonable, but that number becomes unreasonable pretty quickly when you start thinking about hallways and stuff. Anything that could be considered a room. Nix, you gotta redeem that. You gotta redeem that caffeine. That caffeine, whatever we were gonna call it, caffeine boost. I think I need the caffeine. Hydrate. No, that's not it. Told you need one. Yeah, I think you're right. So I'm starting to flag. I'm starting to flag a little bit. My energy is starting to flag a little. Just because we've had such a bracing discussion this whole stream. So what do I want to do? I've waffled about this for a minute here. I think the only thing we can do is sync back all the room flag information when we're done. I don't see a way to do it otherwise. Which I think is fine. I think in the long run, that's not going to matter at all. However, here's the problem. It's not as slick. So our sync block buffer changes is super slick because we just have a preview box.span.copy to this other span. And that just moves the contents of the entire span into the other span. Problem is the copy back can't be that simple. Unless I split that data off, which I might do. I might put it into its own buffer. The only reason I would do that would be to have this incredibly simple copy function, which I guess we don't technically need to do. The other way we would handle this is that we would go through every value and copy over the value, but with one field changed for every struct, and that I do not like. That I do not like. I would like to do it this way. Maybe having one homogeneous block buffer is a mistake. Maybe instead of having like one big block buffer, maybe we want to have like block forms, block rooms, block faces. Like have them as individual buffers. I could see a strong argument for doing that. How many people check to see if a block is outside? It's literally just the hull system, isn't it? They're the only people checking. The derived deck layer data, derived bulk layer data, derived door layer data. Nobody else uses this function. Yeah, cool. Okay, so for these ones, I could easily pass in like a room buffer. All right, that is a pretty big refactor, if I'm understanding it correctly. It would be separating the block into its component parts and storing them separately. I don't love that. But it's not that bad because we aren't paying anything. all we're paying is for the field itself that we're storing. So it's like, because we're doing this 3D buffer thing, we're not paying for to locate any of these. We're just paying for the empty space that we're not using. And it's not like we're paying extra, assuming that we're like, you know, well, there's padding. There's some padding that might happen due to alignment. So we might pay for some extra padding if we're not super smart about the way that we structure this stuff. But that's going to happen either. That sort of thing is going to happen more often than not. So maybe we don't care. Maybe we don't care about the padding. I'm a little scared to completely break the project in the last like 30 minutes of my last stream for the week, but maybe we just do it. Okay. Actually, that helps us to an extent because we could stop storing block haul data as a member variable. We could actually start storing it as a buffer. Right now, we're storing a lot of details on the tile system or on the systems, just because the systems only have one version of a thing that they're dealing with. But eventually, there's going to be many. Sorry, I just batted the microphone with my hand. All right, do we do it? We're about to go into ads. Do we try to do this huge refactor in like the last like 30 minutes of the stream? I guess we might as well, because then we know what we're working on. Guess there's no real reason not to. What all will break when I do this? So we've got our block. So I essentially would need to set out a block form. Block forms, maybe. Block room. Or rooms. This is kind of like the trade-offs you make when you're thinking about component design, where you really only want component data to reside together if that data is always or mostly used together. Otherwise, you're just wasting space. Like if you have like field A and field B in component 1, but whenever the system only ever processes field A or field B, it never processes them together, then it's like, well, maybe you split that component 1 into 2 components and you store the fields separately. Because otherwise you're just wasting space. Well, not space, but you're like, when you're churning through the chunks, you're ignoring most of the data there. We might be running into a similar problem here. Yeah, because this block is only IE-numerable by its forms. That kind of makes me want this to just be the block forms. Although I'll lose this neat little block.forms. Trade-offs. All right, I'm leaning towards breaking up the block to be stored into multiple things. I'm just trying to think through the ways that might bite me in the ass. Rooms. I'm pretty sure we only reference this in 2 places. Here, here, oh, 3 places. But these 2 don't count. So we actually only use it here. Only here. Does anyone else use this in a way that's like compound? Tool system, maybe? No, not the tool system. Oh, well, that's a trick, especially if we add faces, which is not just forms, but it's like a description. It's like a separate thing. The block tool might end up writing to multiple buffers simultaneously, which is not the end of the world. And that's such a relatively slow, I say slow, but it's a relatively infrequent thing that I think that would be fine. I don't think I care about that. All right. I think I'm okay with this. I think I'm okay with this change. I think I could live with it. I say, continuing to try to talk myself into this. Or out of it, I guess, as it were. The tile system should not belong to the edit system, I'm realizing now. Tile system should actually probably be its own thing. Or it should belong to its own group. So it would be like view system group.run, edit system group.run, tile system group.run, whatever, play system group.run. Like, I don't mind having these really short system names for the groups, but then this edit system has a bunch of subsystems. And that's where you get things like the block validation subsystem. I don't think I'll put subsystem in the name though. But I do think I want to organize this a little different. Like the group will be responsible for shared data, like the preview blocks, the settled blocks. I'll probably move some stuff over there. Like, I actually don't know. I'm not actually quite sure what the other examples of that would be. I think I'm going to continue to have this block definition. And I think the definition is going to only be for these like block.forms. Like for these enums maybe, I don't know. And then block forms singular, as in block forms without the dot, that'd be like a particular block form set. And it's a flag, so it could be more than one, right? I know I say form singular here. That actually gets around a number of problems. Actually, I think I want to move in the direction of block forms just having a value and not having multiple subfields. I like a nice component who has one field called value, and that is it. That is my preference for component design, because that lets you do a bunch of neat stuff with like implicit conversions, and like it's very straightforward to deal with and reason about. These aren't, that's actually, the block isn't a component, is it? So I guess I don't care as much about that in that case. It's not actually a component. So we'll say block. So this is actually not going to be a thing, I don't think. So what will the block be if it's not this thing that holds this stuff? I guess it'll be... I guess it could be a class, and we could put help. We could keep the helper functions on this, like block.erase. could do that. I'm like deciding how I want to chop up. How I want to chop up this stuff. Maybe I wouldn't retain that functionality on here. I don't want to say something like blockform.forms. Nyx, a bit off topic, but you love salted caramel so much. Okay. Okay. I like a bit of caramel. Doesn't have to be that salted. I do like me a caramel. I don't have it very often, but I'm always very happy when I like go to the movies and I get like a Milk Dud box, a box of Milk Duds. That's like, that is good stuff to me. For me, the problem is whenever I get a caramel, I'm tempted to say caramel, but I will say caramel. There's a very strong and there's a very intense debate in the candy world about what is what. Caramel is good. Salted is like a +1 modifier for it. Okay, sure. But yeah, my thing is I usually can't find one that's exactly the right texture that I want, like exactly the right density. I don't want like the hard candy, but I don't want it to be like too soft. There's like a sweet spot, and Milk Duds are like exactly that sweet spot for me. Plus they got that little chocolate coating. Oh, so good. Texture is important, yeah. Because it can become something else. Like toffee is good, but that's like a different thing, right? Luckily, I'm not at the point where I'm worried about like crowns getting ripped off by caramel, so I still eat it, but I know that's a concern for like lots of people who've had like dental work. All right, so we're doing it. We're doing it. Are we gonna do this destructively or non-destructively? I'm tempted to do it non-destructively at first because there's 184 usages of the block struct. And I feel like separating this out. I think separating that is good because right now there's only 2 fields here, but there's just going to be more and more and more and more. And it's kind of okay because these aren't components, but it is still kind of wasteful if we don't need access to all of the fields all the time. So let's try to do this bit by bit. So we're going to make a new struct. We're going to call it, do we call it block form or block forms? I think we call it block. I still just want to call it block, dang it. This is my problem. This is my problem. I just want to call it a block and I want to give it all of these characteristics. But then we have a problem where if we want to sync back the buffer, we'd have to actually like, we'd have to do it a way I don't want to do it. All right, I'm not sure. I mean, I am sure that I want to do this. I'm just not quite sure how I want to do it yet. Yeah. So we'll say block forms. This is a public read-only record struct. I don't think it needs to be a partial because I don't think it's going to be that complicated. And then the forms is going to have a block dot forms value. And what am I gonna, are there any guarantees I'm gonna make about this? I'm gonna make it enumerable by its forms. Yeah, okay. It's gonna be enumerable like that. Let's get that reference in here. Get those missing members in here. Make that an expression body. Let's look at how we do this. I think that's how we do it. Do it easy. Is this not publicly accessible information? Will you tell me about the thing I'm looking at? Oh, it's value. Yeah, you're private. Okay, you don't need to be private. If anything, you should be static. Where's all forms? Oh, you're on another page. Oh, all of these static the types are going to be, they're not going to be great. They're not going to be exactly what we want. But let's move you up here and make you public. It's a good start. I think this is going to stop being a struct. I think this is going to become just a class. Because it's not going to be something we instantiate. It's going to be just a thing we use. Once we're done splitting this up into its component parts. So then we can have some neat things. Like we could have some implicit conversion stuff here. So we could say public implicit. I don't know if you need to say public, do you? Public implicit operator. Block form. There we go, like that. Public static. I like this kind of stuff. That's why I really like the structs that have one field. I really love those. All right, so this is probably going to be a minute to get all of this stuff translated over here. I really need to stop using this both flag. It's like so bad. Deck equals 1, bulk equals 2, both equals 3. I could say full. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I want to put there. Both is pretty bad, though. All right, so we're splitting up the block into its different pieces. So we have block forms. We also would need a block rooms. And what would you... Would block rooms be enumerable? It probably should, right? Bit field 64. Value. Using di.bit. What would you be? How would we do this? Enumerable over int. How does your enumerator work? As less than length. And say size of u long times 8. What? This doesn't seem right. Oh, no, that's right. Size of u long times 8. Right? Or no, is it just size of u long? It's just size of u long. Why do I times it by 8? Oh, because it's flags. Because it's all the... Yeah, never mind. Never mind. But wait. Oh, that's really dumb. It should be I times 2, right? When we're iterating, it shouldn't be I plus 1. It should be for I equals 0... Oh, no, it is. It has to be I plus. Oh, so it has to be I equals 0. I is less than length. I plus plus. And then what we do is we have, say, if has I times I to the power of something. I don't know. We'll figure that out. I'll have to think about that. This is my like weird little custom bit field class. And like this enumerator works, but actually no, I guess this is... So this would recognize pairs. So this would recognize our like 1, 2, 3 block forms enum thing if it was set as a field. I'm actually a little confused about how I've written this. I'm going to not think about this for a minute. We're not going to make this enumerable until I figure out how we would want to do that. Pairs, eyes. I don't know. I'm trying to understand the bit field struct I made, and I'm struggling a little bit. That I made in a day. It works though. It works all right. I think it's enumerable. I think it's enumerator is wrong, but it's fine. Maybe it's not. Yeah, because it's not 60. Oh, no, maybe it's fine. Maybe it's... I don't know. I have to think about it. Streamer brain. Streamer brain is hitting me a little bit. Say field. Say flags. All right, I think we are dipping our toes into what's going to be a pretty big refactor here that we are not going to finish immediately, but I think that's okay. I see a direction, and I think once we've split this off, we're going to have a lot easier time managing some of this stuff. I think it's just going to be a little awkward to start while we split up our big monolithic block struct into its component parts. But I think in the long run, it will be good. It will be more modular. There will be less wasted space, hopefully, in the long run. Or wasted processing, if not space. I don't know. I don't think we have to care about cache optimization, but, you know. I don't even know if I would do a good job of caring about it if I did. All right. Well, it's about that time. It's about laundry time. I appreciate everyone hanging out here. I think I gotta go. But we did good today. We had a really lively discussion without anyone getting, you know, hurt, hopefully. We decided on a pretty big refactor that should actually make it a lot easier to be running tasks in parallel, which will be really good because I'm starting to see, I definitely see the hang-ups that we hit when we try to do things like the flood fill. And now we're going to also do a validation check, which is going to be probably not quite as intensive as the flood fill, but actually it's probably not going to be much less. It'll probably be a lot of work to the validation check because each cell would need to check at least each of its neighbors. That's essentially what the flood fill does. So, yeah. That's going to be another busy thing. So it's really important that we can get that on a parallel track and set up this double buffering system so that we can keep working on the main track in a way that like maintains maximum. Because you want the player, when the player is doing something, you want that to remain in like as close to real time as possible, right? So I would love it if the player can continue to fiddle with their block construct, their ship, while some other stuff is happening in the background to analyze what they're building and make determinations about it that it can then push back all in a safe way. I've largely mulliganed on that kind of thing up until now because I've said, you know, I don't really care about the performance. I'm starting to care about the performance of that a little bit. But yeah, sorry it's been a pretty light week. Last light couple of weeks, actually. Missed a lot of streams. We're trying to get back into it. We're trying to get our streak going, you know. Yeah. But yeah, we'll be back next week. I'll try to do some of this work on the side. I say try. I'm not going to do any of this weekend, but I might do a little work on Monday. Maybe Tuesday. But yeah, we'll be back. We're getting close. We're getting close to be wrapped up with this block editor tool. I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I know I said that like a month or two ago, but it's true. We pretty much wrapped up the auto tiler for now. We just need the actual block editing stuff to be a little tighter. But we're getting there. We're going to be building stuff. We're going to be simulating stuff. We're going to be doing a lot of exciting stuff. Once we do that stuff, we're going to start actually seriously looking at Lo-Fi Flyby, at doing a little side project using this tech. Do something in the meantime. Take advantage of all the tech that we've written. Do something we can put out. Start to get maybe wish lists for. Start to get some hype around. Yeah, see what else we're doing. There's good stuff. There's good stuff happening, I say, to convince myself at least as much, if not more than you. But yeah, I'm feeling good about it. Feeling good about the work. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Just thank you all so much. It's crazy that people want to spend their time here and come back and support the channel. That's crazy to me. So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Maximum warp.